Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the profoundly gritty, historically authentic, and frankly, shocking transformation of Judah. If you're familiar with the patriarchal narratives, you already know they are rarely sanitized, and Judah, the fourth son of Jacob, might just be the absolute greatest example of that. We're looking at a life that completely shifts from complicity to responsibility and finally to redemption. So right off the bat, we've got to ask, how does a guy who literally sold his own brother into slavery become the ancestral root of a royal dynasty, the line of David, and ultimately the Messiah? It's the ultimate paradox, right? Judah isn't introduced as some flawless hero. He doesn't start out with any real moral clarity. But his story really forces us to consider how massive failure might actually be the forge for true leadership. Okay, let's dive into this and see exactly how this crazy transformation happens.
Let's start with Section 1, a household of rivalry, focusing on the gritty sociology of Jacob's tents.
Look, you really can't understand Judah in a vacuum. He was born into this deeply fractured house full of competing loves. He's born to Leah, who is the unloved wife of Jacob. She had spent her first 3 births desperately trying to bargain for her husband's affection. But by the time she has her 4th son, she just stops negotiating. She names him from the Hebrew root yada, which means to praise or to confess. It was this profound theological identity. But as you'll see, this identity of praise contrasts incredibly sharply with the shame and the rivalry that would end up defining his early years.
And this breakdown brilliantly illustrates the toxic environment he grew up in. Jacob had 12 sons, totally divided by maternal allegiance. You've got Leah's 6 sons, the concubine's 4, and then Rachel's 2 favorite sons, Joseph and Benjamin. Jacob's blatant, in-your-face favoritism toward Rachel's kids. Think of the famous coat of many colors he gave to Joseph. It created a household psychology where resentment was just the constant background hum of daily life. Judah grows up as the 4th born of the unloved wife, just watching his younger half-brother get absolutely everything.
Moving right along to Section 2, the price of a brother. Calculation over cruelty. Well, that background hum of resentment, it eventually boils over into a murderous crisis. When Joseph, the favored son, comes checking on his brothers out in the fields, the older brothers actually plot to kill him. But Judah steps forward. He says, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him." So Judah emerges as a natural leader here, someone whose voice clearly carries weight in the room. But he calculates a pragmatic transaction over actual morality. He invokes their shared blood, all while literally organizing the sale of that very blood. And the crucial detail here is this number, 20. 20 pieces of silver. The brothers pull Joseph from the pit and sell him to traders for that exact amount. Judah becomes the man who transforms brutal violence into a commercial transaction. He introduces calculation into cruelty. It really shows he has the capacity to act decisively, to lead the pack, but he is doing it completely without a moral center. It's just a massive, heartbreaking moral compromise.
Which brings us to Section 3, the woman who trapped him, the crucible of Tamar.
So after that terrible betrayal, Judah actually separates from his brothers, which sets the stage for his ultimate reckoning. He settles down in the valley of Adullam, marries a Canaanite woman, and has 3 sons. But tragedy strikes, and it strikes rapidly. He arranges a marriage for his firstborn, Er, to a woman named Tamar. But Er is wicked, and he dies. Now, in that ancient culture, the next brother, Onan, had a strict levirate duty to marry Tamar and provide an heir for his deceased brother. Onan goes through with the marriage, but deliberately prevents conception. And then he dies too. At this point, Judah is absolutely terrified. He's so scared of losing his last son, Shelah. So instead of fulfilling his legal and moral duty to Tamar, he just strings her along. He tells her to wait, secretly intending to never, ever give her Shelah. He traps Tamar in this terrible suspended state. She isn't free to marry anyone else, but she's completely denied a future in his family. It's a terrible decision driven entirely by self-protective fear. But Tamar, she refuses to be erased. She acts out of pure, calculated necessity. Knowing Judah is traveling to Timnah, she disguises herself as a roadside prostitute. Judah doesn't recognize her, and he actually negotiates for her services. But Tamar demands a pledge to guarantee payment: his signet ring, his cord, and his staff. Now, these aren't just trinkets. These are the ancient equivalents of his ID card, his signature, and his social standing. She brilliantly outsmarts him and holds on to the ultimate proof of his identity. About 3 months later, word reaches Judah that his daughter-in-law Tamar is pregnant. Playing the role of the outraged, righteous patriarch, Judah immediately demands she be burned. But as she's being brought out, She simply sends the signet, cord, and staff to Judah with a simple message. The man to whom these belong is the father. This is it. This moment right here is the turning point of his entire life. Judah looks at his own items, his pride is just completely shattered, and he says, "She is more righteous than I." The specific Hebrew concept he uses here is sadgah. It means righteousness, or being more in the right. And you have to understand, this wasn't just some powerful patriarch making a minor social concession to get out of an embarrassing jam. No, this was a profound internal awakening. For the absolute first time in his life, Judah stops calculating. He stops shifting the blame. He owns his failure publicly, completely stripping away all his pretense. The same man who sold his brother and lied to his father finally tells the devastating truth about himself. Now let's look at Section 4, the ultimate substitution, the test in Egypt.
Years pass, a devastating famine hits Canaan, and the brothers are forced to travel down to Egypt just to get food. There, a disguised Joseph is now second in command, and he is about to perfectly recreate the past to test them. Joseph demands that the brothers bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, back to Egypt. Jacob, who is completely terrified of losing Rachel's last remaining son, flat out refuses. But the famine gets worse, and Judah steps up to his father and says, "I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him." The guy who once asked, "What profit is it to sell a brother?" is now willingly putting his own future, his own life, on the line as an existential guarantee for his father's new favorite. I mean, this is the literal language of atonement. Down in Egypt, Joseph sets the trap. He hides his silver cup in Benjamin's sack, accuses him of theft, and declares that Benjamin alone must remain in Egypt as a slave. The rest of the brothers are free to go. This situation perfectly mirrors the pit from all those years ago. They can abandon a favored brother and save their own skins. But in this absolute jaw-dropping climax, Judah steps forward, tells Joseph the entire heartbreaking story of their father, and says, "Let me remain instead of the boy." He literally offers himself as a slave so his brother can go free. Let's just pause for a second and weigh the magnitude of this transformation. On the one hand, you have the old Judah, calculating, pragmatic, selling his own flesh and blood for 20 pieces of silver. On the other hand, the new Judah, offering his own body, his own freedom, as a substitute to save a brother and spare his father's heart. Ancient commentators point out that true repentance requires being in the exact same situation and choosing differently. Judah didn't just regret the past, he actively rewrote it through his self-sacrifice. It's this exact moment that finally breaks Joseph, causing him to weep and reveal his true identity to his brothers. Finally, Section 5, the lion's destiny, grace working through human failure. Judah's transformed soul certainly doesn't go unnoticed by his father, or by history for that matter. At the very end of Jacob's life, he blesses his sons, but he completely bypasses the older brothers, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, and gives the ultimate blessing to Judah. Judah is a lion's cub. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. The scepter is the ultimate symbol of royal authority. Jacob prophesies that from this flawed, broken, but completely honest and transformed man, true leadership will emerge. From Judah's line comes King David, and ultimately, according to the texts, the Messiah. God routes the ultimate destiny of this family not through the perfect son, but through the one who failed miserably, confessed it, and changed. And this perfectly maps out the theology of change. Judah's life isn't some straight, easy ascent to greatness. It starts with massive failure. Then he faces intense confrontation on the road with Tamar that strips him down and leads to internal transformation. That internal change then produces external responsibility as he offers himself up for Benjamin. And only then, after all of that, does he step into his destiny. It's exactly what the Greeks call metanoia, a complete 180-degree turning of the soul. This teaches us that true leadership in this narrative is born not from being perfect, but from the courageous owning of one's deepest failures. Which leaves us with this final, lingering question to think about. Are our deepest failures the end of our story, or are they the very crucible where our true legacy is forged? Judah really stands as the patron saint of second chances. He proves that being stripped of all your pretense is exactly where a brand new story begins. Keep this in mind as you think about how grace operates, not by magically sidestepping our messy realities, but by working right through the thick of them. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a whole new perspective on this incredible historical narrative. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.